Thank you for joining the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast with your host, Clayton Craddock.
A freelancer mentality. You're a professional musician. You come to New York City. How does one deal with uncertainty, knowing that shows don't last long?
You have to be versatile, not only versatile musically. That's very important so that you can get all different kinds of gigs. You can have your Broadway gig, then you can do your wedding reception on classical guitar, or you can teach, or you can do the club date playing R&B, or the rock gig. The more versatile you are as stylistically, the more gigs that you can get, but also be professionally versatile. Now I'm a music coordinator, and it's not something I went to school for or something I said, I'm going to do that. It really happened organically for me. And like we said earlier in the podcast, I wasn't like a mathematician or anything like that, or a labor attorney. I didn't go to law school. So these are just, like Rodney Jones used to say, they're caught, not taught. You just get it, So, the things, you realize, oh, wow, I have those skills. I didn't realize I could do that. So, contracting has become so big for me that now I don't play on a show. I had played on a show nonstop for 20 years back to back. When the pandemic hit and everything stopped, I had, like everybody, had nothing, even no matter how diverse I was, how much I diversified my, freelancing and all of the other things I had going on. Everything stopped because it's all within entertainment. When things started coming back, the contracting one by one started, the shows started coming back, the tours and Broadway. But my show, I was playing on Frozen at the time of the shutdown. So that show had closed. They closed up. They said they're not coming back. So it was the first time I didn't have a show at night, which was a new experience for me. I wasn't getting on the bus or in the car to go into town every night to do a show. And I didn't realize how crazy life was right up until the pandemic, how stretched thin I was. I was playing a show every night. Well, not every show, but, 5 nights a week. In-house contractor on the same show. And I was working on, probably 14 or 15 productions. Tours and Broadway combined. It was ridiculous. I mean, and weekends aren't a break, Now I know what it's like to have a weekend. I probably wouldn't play a show anymore. And that's an interesting position to be in for me because that's all I've ever done in New York professionally is work on Broadway. I have a lot before that, but I'm just saying when things really started to click as a freelancer, it was Broadway. That was the industry that I liked, the regularity and the routine. And the sustainability. I didn't have to go out of town. I like the steadiness of it and the benefits. There are things, you can qualify for health insurance if you pay into the health fund, pension. There's a lot of perks for that.
What do you think the benefits are of joining like Local 802? And in your opinion, how important is it for musicians to be actively involved in the local and national musicians union?
It is definitely important to join the union. I mean, I think that the misconception we said earlier is that they're an employer. You might find job postings, or you may there might be certain activities around the union that, for example, there is a program called Music for the Soul. I have a payroll service that I run payroll for this program that the Local 802 runs with the city of New York for health and hospitals. They do these jazz trio gigs at hospitals, and they run them on it's their own contract, and they're all jazz musicians like trios, doing jazz performances at hospitals for the patients. So it's a good cause. So a lot of these musicians are they're just jazz musicians. They're totally outside Broadway. It's nothing to do with Broadway at all. A lot of them are not union members, but they're referred to by the jazz department, Todd Weeks over at Local 802, he's got his list of people. So it's not so much of an employer, but it's like a referral service, and there are musicians connected to that. So there are opportunities, but you can't look at the union as a job hunter for you, or, they're not an employer. but there are programs, and so joining a union is beneficial in some respects for freelance musicians. Well, in all respects for freelance musicians, because you're protected by contracts and you're protected by area standards, and you're going to be working on a contract. Well, one of the things I noticed becoming a music coordinator is when you really break down the numbers, like, I don't know why everything isn't on contract. It's not that much more expensive to do it the right way. When I've run numbers for recording sessions that want to go dark, if, like, let's say there's a recording session that wants to go dark, not pay benefits, that means not go on contract. Versus on the contract, I'm just like, well, why wouldn't they just do the contract? It's not that much more expensive to do it right. And the risks of like getting caught and the union coming and filing a grievance, it's not worth it. Like if you do a recording session and then those, for film, and you get paid $500, that feels good right for a minute. And then when that film's in the theater and they're using that music all over the place, and then it becomes a soundtrack album on Spotify, and there's all this other new use, and now people are singing to it on the morning shows or whatever you want to say, and you made your $500 doesn't really work. But if you filed a contract, now you have the AFM behind you to track those things. There's a mechanism in place to abide by, and they're signatories. There's a production house that is a signatory to an agreement with the union that's going to protect these people from working here, that work here, and protect them for future payments. And that's important. And because that's long-term thinking. Then you get benefits and pension payments. The more you do this, the longer you do these gigs, you go to the union or open your mailbox, there's a check. I mean, it's not like it used to be. One day you'll say, hey man, there's $300 for this thing I did 10 years ago. Wow. That's the stuff that the union is important for.
How do we inform ourselves about how to protect ourselves?
Everybody should read the fine print. I mean, that's just in life. If you're on a gig and you don't know the rules, that's okay. But then when you get your check and something isn't right, or something happens that you weren't expecting, or you feel wronged, well, maybe there's a reason for that in the contract. The members can download them. They can go on the website and download them. Or the AFM website, the national contracts. See, there's local contracts like the Broadway collective bargaining agreement, or off-Broadway, or limited press, or single engagement contracts. Those are like local 802 jurisdiction specific. But then there's the national contracts, which cover the whole country, North America, like recording contracts, film contracts, commercial announcements, like the jingle contracts. Those are national, and the touring contract, the Broadway touring contract. Those are national contracts.
Now, did you know about these things when you were a musician, even an in-house contractor? Did you know about all this stuff, or did you learn more about it as you started working with Keller?
I knew a lot about Broadway because I had done it so many years. I didn't know like the unwritten stuff. There's stuff that happens on Broadway that's not in the contract. It's just a precedent. And it takes a while to say, oh, well, it says that, but 10 years ago, this happened, so we do it this way now. And some of that is like, well, the contract is written poorly. I mean, there are contracts in other places like Chicago. Drummers say, why don't I have any doubles? I'm playing drum kit and, I have a tambourine here. Why isn't that a double? Well, there's an argument to be made that it should be a double, but a mounted tambourine is not a double, or a cowbell. Mounted, it's trap kit. The contract says one thing. It does not go into specificity about percussion doubling. It's really bad. You have categories: mallets, orchestral, and then it doesn't even say Latin. I think it says hand drums, or it might even say Latin drums, like bongos and congas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It might even use that word. So what about djembe? That's not Latin percussion.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that. Interesting.
It's not written. So what do you just not give a double? Someone is playing a djembe? Where does it fall? You can't see. That's what I mean. That goes back to the Lion King. Keller had to talk to the Lion King. There's all this percussion across. What is it? 4 percussionists on that show.
There's 2 on the side, from what I remember.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 in the pit, and they're playing so many percussion instruments that are like way ethnic, African, mallets and percussions and shakers and all kinds of things. You're never going to find a list that has it all. So they had to think of groups, like, well, these are this group and this is this group. None of that's in the contract. Otherwise, same with the woodwind flutes. There's all these flutes. The flute book, there's like 70 flutes. I don't know, not 70, but like so many that there would have been 20 doubles. They had to categorize them and say, well, this is these high flutes and these types of flutes and those types of flutes. Guitar has the same deficiencies. Archtop guitar, jazz guitar, not written in the contract. It's a double.
So what about what about a double neck guitar?
That's a good one.
But, yeah, so a 12 string versus a nylon versus the hollow body versus, that guitar that I'm seeing now, the Gibson, that's an electric guitar, obviously. It's a hollow body. Is that different from, say, if you had to use a BC Rich? That's only bad guitar I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's an L5. That's a 1965 L5, Wes Montgomery model. It's not his model. He had one just like that.
So a Gibson Les Paul, how's that different from a Gibson Les Paul? Are they under the same?
No, that's an archtop jazz guitar. You play it has flat wound strings. That's the gray area.
Wait, you mean that guitar is different from a Gibson Les Paul when it comes to a double on Broadway?
Yes.
Really?
Well, the Gibson Les Paul would just be electric guitar. That's the chair. That's bass pay.
Les Paul, Fender Strat.
Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Telecaster.
There is a common rule of thumb that if an orchestrator writes in, I want a Les Paul here in the score, like it's an electric guitar part and there's strats or telly, whatever the player decides to bring, fine. And then somebody writes, this has to be a Les Paul. And they have to bring in a second guitar. A conversation would need to take place like, well, it's a double, even though it's not. It's still an electric guitar. It's just another one. Who cares?
Yeah, well, okay, now let's get back to drums. I am Andres, and I have the regular snare drum, 14-inch snare. Oh, I need a marching snare. I need a piccolo snare. So those are all doubles, or are they? Is that the?
Nope.
But it's all snare drums, so it's all under a trap set. It's all under the.
Yeah, they're snares. Snare family. Hey, I didn't write the contract. What I'm saying is there's a line you have to balance what's reasonable. I've had this conversation: electric 4-string versus electric 5-string. Why isn't it a double? Well, could you play the whole show on a 5-string? If the notes weren't below the low E, you could still play the whole show on a 5-string. So why do you need the 5-string then? Well, I want the lower notes. Well, if they're written, then you need a 5-string. Okay, well then you don't need a 4-string. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but fretless has no frets. You can't. It's a different instrument. It's technically different. The technique to play that instrument is completely different. It's a different.
Okay,
instrument.
I get that.
The technique to play an archtop guitar is completely different than Les Paul. Debatable, but it is not as much as the fretless versus electric bass. But the contract on Broadway has problems in that it's not as specific as some other places like Chicago or LA. There's a list like 3 pages long of all the different instruments that are considered doubles and not.
Wait, so the local 47 contract is more detailed than local 802?
A lot of major cities, yes. Chicago's, oh yeah.
And why isn't ours detailed?
I hope one day. See, here's the thing. Our contract has a lot of problems, but it has a lot of great things. Sometimes in union labor situations, it's best to not have it written because precedent can become the rule of thumb. There are certain things that are unwritten that are just done. Concertmaster is not in the contract. And you get a double for being concertmaster because, you're leading the section. I always give it, even if there's just one violin and one cello, but it's not in the contract. Do I have to give it? No, but it's just done that way for so long. But here's the deal. You negotiate that. You bargain that it's on the table. Well, we want concertmaster written in the contract. Okay, what are you going to give up for that? That's how negotiation works in labor. It's a precedent and everyone's okay with it. But there's a thing where past practice and precedent is such, and everyone just accepts it, that this is the way it is. We're going to just keep doing this. The minute you bargain it, you got to give something up. So if you say, I want concertmaster written in the contract now, I want it codified. Okay, well, we want this codified then. Well, we don't want that. Well, now you're negotiating. So that's why, part of the reason why people don't understand, they criticize our contract, but there's a lot of things that are there or not there that it might be better off the way it is. Drummers, I think, get a little bit of the short end of the stick when it comes to doubling. Especially, see, here's a big example, and I'm going to throw the last administration under the bus here, and I don't care, you can publish this. And drummers will relate to this, and I want them to hear it from my side. Running Ableton in shows, right? Ableton, is you don't get paid for doing that. It falls under the synth premium, right? It's a 25% electronic premium. But over the years, everyone knows Ableton runs click, it runs, everything taps into it, the time code and lighting. So these drummers are responsible for all this stuff going on stage, triggering it. The responsibility for, and it's, it's another element to playing the chair that's more difficult and hard, and it should be rewarded. So all this is going on, and drummers just, are saying, we want something about Ableton in the contract because this is ridiculous. We should get paid for this, and it's true. They should get paid for this. So all this talk was, leading up to like, we want Ableton written in the contract. We want to get paid. Basically, the thing was that there was a trade-off. Well, who's going to operate it? The music director or the drummer? Well, when the drummer does it, they want to get paid. Well, then why don't you just send it to the sound department, let them run it on QLab or something. Just give it to them. That's the way out. Or if you're a drummer, you can say, yeah, I don't know how to use Ableton. I'm not good with computers. I can't do that. All right, well, we'll just have someone else do it. Like, there was a little bit of power in that. No one can make you do it, right? You're like, that's not a drum. I don't know. I don't know how to operate that. I'm uncomfortable. I don't know. You could do that. Or you could say, I'm only doing it if I get paid, and then now you got to go to the union and get them involved. So what happened? So enough voices of drummers were like, we need to do something about this. It's becoming out of control. It's a demand now, and it's almost expected. We need to get paid, or we need to say no. So the last administration, who was very inexperienced and whatever, wrote in the contract, it got in the last negotiation, all Ableton, and they used the word Ableton, which is so stupid. Because in 10 years, it's not going to be called Ableton. It's going to be called something else. It's like in the contract, they have Oberheim in there. You never want to have names of products because it's going to be obsolete. And then you're arguing about, well, what's an Oberheim? Is this a module? That language is in there. Well, I play 2 keyboards. This is a module. Well, it's not a module. It's still, like we're having these discussions. Guitar players too. So they say anyone playing Ableton, they use the word Ableton. Ableton can only be operated by an 802 member.
Oh, so it can't go to the sound.
Period.
Board.
No, nothing about pay. And they're like, yeah, see, Ableton has to be by an 802 member now. We can't let anyone else to. It's like, no, you idiot. We want to get paid. So now drummers don't have a choice. If the show wants to use Ableton, you have to do it. Or someone in the pit for no extra money. My point in all this is, don't even put it in. If there's a precedent, go with it. The drummers don't use Ableton. We don't do that anymore. It's QLab. We don't know how to do that. Or, you know what? The last show I did, that drummer got an extra 25%. And then this contractor might say, yeah, our drummers do like concertmaster. It's just you start to set a precedent. I started doing that with something else I'm not going to talk about. I set a precedent knowing that there was a window for me to be able to do it, knowing that it's a technology for guitar players that is very annoying to use, that requires lots of programming, that was kind of dumped on them for no extra pay. So I set a precedent that hopefully will catch on. But it's like, you can't, once you write something in, you got to give something up. That's how negotiations work.
Speaking of negotiation, I've learned to be better at it, and I've never really shied away from it. And I find it actually fun, because it's like, somebody is hiring me for a specific service, and I want a specific amount of money or specific conditions. When it comes to Broadway, there are things that probably aren't written in the contract. Like, if I get hired to play a show, we need drums in the pit. There's nothing in the contract that says the production has to provide a drum set. The production has to pay for a drum set. The production has to rent a drum set. Drummers probably don't even think about this stuff until they either get a show or, have to think, oh, I'm going to bring my drums in. It's like, am I getting paid for this? How does this work? How have you thought about these things recently, as far as like bringing your guitars and bringing drums in? Have you thought through those kind of things? And what do you recommend drummers know about negotiation? Tell me what things drummers should probably know about those kind of situations.
You're right. On a Broadway show, drums are, it's like a violin or guitar. That's your instrument. So you have to show up with your instrument. And as unfair as that may be, the contract does say keyboards and percussion will be, purchased or rented by the production will rent that, not drums. Doesn't say drums, says percussion items and keyboards. So that may be unfair, but it is what it is. So you got to bring your drum kit. So if a contractor calls you and says, I'm hiring you for this show, we get into the theater on September 17th, and you'll load in your kit on the 16th. And you say, well, I'm not using my drums. I'll say, well, then we'll call another drummer. Sorry, you don't have a choice. Now, and I've heard that some productions rent drums from the player. They don't have to. So either that was negotiated for some reason, I can't answer that, or the contractor didn't know any better, or the production didn't know any better. It's rare. I've never seen a show where the drummer has a kit that's rented, except, here's an example. The band is on stage. Well, the scenic wants a white drum kit. Well, you're the drummer. I don't have a white drum kit. All right, well, we got to buy something. I bought kits when the band is on stage. That is true, because there's a visual element to that. But after that, your drums. Now, of course, there could be some things like in Hamilton, all those snares, we bought those because, the rope tension, custom, military style snare, like Andres didn't have that, or what, we had to buy certain elements. Drum pads, that's production buys that. But, cymbals and stands and drum kit, yeah, the player buys those, brings them. And in the cast rehearsal process, that's free for all. You can say, well, I'll bring my drum kit in, but I need a rental. No, we don't want to do that. All right, well then you'll rent them somewhere else.
Now, why isn't that in the contract? As life goes on, I get as detailed as humanly possible. When I get asked to play a gig, where is it? Who am I playing with? What time do we start? What time do we end? Are we getting fed? How much are we getting paid? When are we getting paid? And in what fashion are we getting paid?
All right.
What songs are we playing? So when it comes to playing a show, okay, you want me to do this rehearsal. What time do we start? What time do we end? When is lunch? Do we have? And the thing about it, we're following actors' equity breaks on these workshops, which is fascinating. What are local 802 breaks? Who takes precedent here? I mean, obviously, there are more.
You talking about breaks now?
Yeah, yeah. But I'm looking at the details. So when it comes to renting a drum set or getting a drum set for the rehearsal stage of a show or workshop, why aren't those things in the collective bargaining agreement?
Do you want that? Do you want drum rental for cast rehearsals in the contract?
Well, if it turns into something where this show is going to be on Broadway and you got to bring your entire drum set. Say, for instance, you only have one drum set. I got to bring my only drum set to play the show for 5 years, 3 years, 1 month, whatever.
Buy another drum set. It's New York. It's Broadway. Come on, you're a professional. No, I'm serious. I have a show. I just got called for a show. It has a mandolin part. I don't have a good mandolin. Well, do I expect the show to buy me a new mandolin? No, I'm not. I'm not an entitled prick. I'm a professional. I buy my own instruments. I'm just saying. Here, I'm being a hard ass, but I'm just saying.
No, I know.
You have to be careful with what you want in the contract, because if you say I want, what you could. Scenario one is I need $500 a week to rent my drums for cast rehearsals, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Fine, we'll pay you $500. The next show comes up, well, we can only give you $450. All right. The next show comes up, I want $600. Okay. See, it's where you're making deals. Now it's in the contract because it becomes a thing. You put in the contract. Okay, it's $400. We went through the process of labor negotiations. It's in the contract now. You have to provide it now for cast rehearsals, and you get $425 a week prorated when you're not there. So you sub out. You see what I'm saying? So you got to be careful with what you put in a contract. Okay, you get $425 a week now, and you have to provide it for both cast rehearsals and the pit.
Where do you draw the line with the details regarding what is classified as a drum set, what's percussion, what's is djembe, Latin percussion or African percussion, and where do the 12.5% come in? Like, how detailed do you want it, or should we?
I mean, there's a balance between electing smart people to run the union, which we have done in the past and have not done in the recent past, and having reasonable people in management and music coordinators who I always want people to get paid. I started a payroll service because I was tired of going to the check window at the union during COVID. There was that, or I was contracting, running the payroll, have this whole software system, running all this automated stuff, 99% of the work. And then the last 1% is actual cutting of the checks. And then I had people saying, hey, I never got my check. Where can I get my check? Where is it? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Someone else cut the checks. So I'm like, why can't I cut the checks? So I spent a long time figuring that whole part of the business out. So I run the payroll too. My point in bringing that up is this, that I pride myself in seeing people get paid. I love when things like balance out, like, oh, okay, everything's cleared. And, it's like checks cleared. Like, I get angry when I look at the business account and I ran a huge payroll for a project and there's a few outstanding checks. I'm like, man, just deposit your damn check already. Like, I want people to get their check. I'm not one of these there's a misconception, and I can say this here on the podcast, that music coordinators, contractors win points with producers by saving money on the backs of musicians.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I hear that too.
Yeah, it's bullshit. There's no scale wages are scale wages. When you're working on a production, the general management wants to see how much does it cost to do 9 hours of rehearsal versus 12. How much does it cost to with this orchestration, I've rarely had a producer say, that's too many doubles on that chair. That's not my battle. That's not my battle. So the misconception of, well, that contractor saves money by, shaving off this and that. No, that by the time I'm there, I'm just there to make sure the rules are correct. If the orchestrator says that reed chair has 4 doubles, I'm not taking away the flute. That has nothing to do with me.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I've had that said to my face. You make money off the backs of musicians. I had the union president tell me that once, not Tino. So use your imagination. and he said that in front of a lot of contractors. So that's complete bullshit. We don't get paid based on saving money on a show. That's not how the business works. It's just not true.
Okay.
Maybe in 1952 or something, but that's not how the business works.
But don't you get, I guess, brownie points for not having it be too expensive for the production?
I mean, I might run the numbers and have a general manager say, no, we can't do this. Is just too much. But I can't change scale. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't say, now there is sometimes where there's equipment purchases, if I'm buying like, a bunch of gear. But even then, I'm not responsible for that. Like the keyboard programmer, Randy Cohen, Randy Cohen's become like, it's amazing. He's become like a department. Keyboards are like a department, basically. Same with Strange Cranium, like with all the programming involved and all the stuff going on keyboards, and they provide the equipment. It's I work in conjunction with them, but if those numbers are too high, I might hear complaints, but I can't do much about it. I can't go to Randy Cohen and say, you're too expensive. Let's figure out how we can save them money so you and I will get the next gig. Like, that's just not how it works. It's like, well, this is the show. This is the programming that we created based on the orchestration and how many musicians are here and what the composers wanted and the Ableton and the this and the that. And this is what it costs. Like, we go to Sweetwater, we buy this equipment, we have these many hours, and like my department, it's like, there's not a way to save money like that. It is what it is. Then you have to make a decision. Well, we make cuts, we don't, or there's a lot of variables about that stuff, but to put it all on the contractor, like we are somehow like able to save money. Like, don't worry, I'll get you this band for cheaper. Like, this isn't 1957, like some like, mob, like, this is not how it works. It is what it is. Now, if you don't know what you're doing and you're not reasonable and you haven't done it enough and you don't know the contract and you don't understand some of the unwritten stuff or precedent and don't have enough experience, you could very easily inflate a music department budget by so much that they'll come to you and say, what the hell is this? But that's just somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or a dysfunctional show.
What do you mean dysfunctional show? Somebody, the producers don't know what they're doing?
No, I'm just saying you might have a music department from the top down that wants the world, that just wants everything on this show. This show is the greatest show that has ever been on Broadway. It's going to change the world. My music is the greatest, and therefore we need all of this stuff, 7 doubles on each instrument, all this electronic stuff, 4 keyboards and all this programming and Ableton and this and that. So yeah, you have to be reasonable. I have found that when I'm contracting a project, recording a live event, whatever, album recordings or jingle sessions or club dates or whatever, one-off things, concerts, I can run payroll. So if I'm running a project, I'll send an invoice that includes the payroll fees, the taxes, the cartage, the wages, the benefits, and everything. And I have never had someone look at that number and say, no. They just pay it. It's an invoice. It's like, I thought this was a lot of my thinking during COVID. Like, You call a plumber and, you're like, what does it cost? You get the bill, you just pay it. It's not, scale is scale. This is what it costs. Now, if you have a 20-piece band and you're budgeting, you're like, man, we really can't have 20 people, maybe 12. That's a different conversation. That has nothing to do with what the costs are. Those are negotiated scale wages, and pension is pension. So my point is, when there's an invoice, I time it so that invoice is paid by the gig, so I can cut the checks right away. And everyone's on direct deposit or gets their check. So there's efficiency, but there are basic skills that musicians need to have that I've learned during having a payroll service. Like, you would be surprised how many people don't understand how to fill out a W-4. They don't do their tax doc. From being an in-house, they fill it out wrong. They don't put their social in. They don't know. They don't understand the deductions and the allowances and all of that. Is it our responsibility as Local 802 to teach accounting? No, that's great. If I could give a workshop on how to do that, but I don't know. I know how to do mine. So go to H&R Block or something. It's just like, there's life skills. That falls to me in the category of, if you're an adult and you're working on Broadway, you should have a watch, have an instrument that works, dress well, smell good, or don't smell, be on time, play your ass off, and be easy to work with. Like, there's eccentric people, there's artistic people that, everybody is going to be, you walk into a theater in every department, you're going to see that. So, you don't know how to fill out a W-4, ask someone for help, or take it home and ask someone else for help. Like, I'm not saying you must do this in order to be on Broadway or your band. I'm just saying, like, these are the skills that you need to know how to do at some point. So you'll succeed if you figure that out. If you're wondering why after a few years of not succeeding, and you look at those and ask yourself, did I miss something? That's all I'm saying. I don't look for all of that because I don't have time. But at the end of the day, if I'm wondering why something's not working and I'm like, oh, well, hard to deal with, or I've had it before. Great guy, great player, always on time, so eager, so is a lifelong dream, had a piece of shit guitar, sounded terrible, couldn't afford to get another one. Everybody complained, like that's, so what do you do? It's like, man, you'd be surprised. There's lots of, everybody has, and who knows why, didn't have any money. I don't know, I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying, like, you have to understand that people bring baggage. These are artists, these are people, these are human beings. So you have to be empathetic too. But at the end of the day, bare minimum.
Why, when you're working at say, for instance, the Schubert Theater or the Imperial Theater, can Clayton Craddock not use Broadway Drumming 101 Incorporated to have myself be paid for my services in that theater?
Because collective bargaining agreements cover individuals, not business entities.
So a music director is, I guess, generally hired by the production. They're also local 802 members. So how does that get reconciled?
That's a good question. See, so for many years, there were lots of musicians on Broadway getting paid as a corp in the pit on the house payroll. And most music directors have corps, conductors, and are on a different payroll, are on the production payroll, getting paid as a corp. One day, a theater company read New York City labor law that you can't, under a collective bargaining agreement, you can't pay independent contractors. It doesn't cover independent contractors. It covers individuals. They have to be employees are not independent contractors. Employees
Right.
are employees.
Right.
So some theater company read the fine print and said, no, we're not paying you on a W-9. Why not? He does it. I've done it on 2 other shows. No, we're not doing it. It went to the union. The union agreed with them. In fact, said, what do you mean people are getting paid as independent contractors? That's against the law.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Broadway Drumming 101 YouTube page. You'll find more content that isn't featured on the podcast or on the Broadway Drumming 101 Instagram page. Make sure when you subscribe to the YouTube page, you click on the button to be notified when a new video is published. Be sure to visit our new shop at merchandise.broadwaydrumming101.com. Stay tuned for more.
In fact, said, what do you mean people are getting paid as independent contractors? That's against the law. That one slipped through the cracks. Those still, technically, you're still not supposed to, but they do. On a recording contract, how many people record records? You know, Steve Lukather isn't going to get paid to Steve Lukather on an AFM contract. He's going to get paid to his company. Well, how's that different? That's an agreement. That's a collective bargaining agreement. Well, you know, it's an AFM agreement. So there's, you know, there are moments where it doesn't make a lot of sense. That's more of a New York specific law as far as the collective bargaining agreement is concerned, is my understanding. They took it only so far before, because there would be too much backlash. All these conductors and orchestrators that get paid as corps. I don't agree with it. You know, I think they should change that, but I don't know how you change that.
You think that people should be able to get paid as a corp?
I do.
Why is that?
Well, for one, it was past practice and no one said anything until one theater caught on.
Okay.
But I don't know how you fix that. That's New York law. That's contractual law. That's labor law. I don't know how you fix that.
And for musicians that are musicians, and, you know, we spend our time learning our craft, getting our instruments, not smelling, as you say.
It's a problem, by the way.
And one day we figure out how to maximize our tax advantage by using a corporation to your benefit. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend people look into that sooner than later, or do you just what's your view on the business side of being a musician?
It depends on how much outside stuff you do. If you do a lot of recording or teaching, club dates, or you have some other side hustles, you know, the point is that you can have a corp and you can write off expenses against your, so you might have a Broadway show or subbing, so you can't get paid that to your corp, but you can balance some certain things. Like if you're buying gear or equipment, strings, sticks, drum heads, whatever, or cab rides or meals, or you can get a good accountant, but you can write off all that stuff and try and balance some of your tax liabilities against having a corp. For you and me, it's been huge. Some other people, it might not be huge, but it might be something. Something's better than nothing.
Strategies that people could use to network with professionals that play on shows and that are already doing what these young people want to do. What do you think are some good strategies in order to increase your network, or just network in general?
Well, you have to sub. If you want to get into Broadway, you have to find a way to sub. Well, then how do you sub? You have to locate who the players are on the shows that you're interested in, and try and reach out. And a lot of there might be a few slam doors, but one of them might open. And again, references are key. So it's a small world, right? So like, I've had people reach out to me that I don't know, and they'll say, "Hey, I want to," and by the way, I try and get back to every single person that reaches out to me, because Keller always did that. Even if I don't have anything to offer, even if I'll keep you in mind. I'll refer them to my website to upload their information. and their bio and their resume. But I'll say, I'll keep you in mind. And I do. But if someone says, hey, I met Clayton Craddock, at his gig the other night, and he sounded great. I was hanging out with him, like some hook, some way for me to say, oh, well, maybe I'll just call Clayton and see. And then Clayton says, yeah, that guy was cool. I dug his vibe. And hey, I saw him play. If there's a way to find contact the drummers, hang out with drummers, hang out with musicians, and at some point there's going to be a link. There's going to be a person who knows a person, and that's how what I mean when I say referrals mean everything. To the point where if I'm looking for a musician, I'll call Richard Hammond, and I'll say, hey man, who are your subs right now? Who do you like? Is there any new person that came and watched your book and or sub for you that's new, and who do you dig right now? And he'll say, oh man, there's this bassist that came and watched, and she was amazing, and she did this, and she's from out of town. Great bass player Vivi Rama. I did a show at the Public Theater in 2017 or 2018, and the composer said, I have a friend from LA. She's awesome. And I said, okay, cool. I'm not going to stand in the way. And I loved her playing, and I loved her vibe. She was super cool. Didn't get to know her that much because it was a short run, but I kept her information, and I forgot about her. She moved back to LA, just forgot about her. And she reached out to me, and she said, hey, I'm moving to Montclair with my wife. We're going to be moving, and we're relocating. I don't know. I remember you live in the area, we could hang out, or maybe if you know of any shows and just checking in. And I was like, oh wow, she's moving here. So I recommended her for a couple of other gigs, and the feedback was so great. I put her on another off-Broadway show, and I would have put her on a Broadway show. I just didn't have anything at the time. She got snapped up. She's at the Britney Spears show right now. She'll be on the next show. So she's in the scene, The advice is you got to just find a way to link up with somebody who you admire and be easy to work with, and that they'll vouch for you, because referrals are everything. Referrals are everything, because it could go the other way too. Someone could say, and that word travels fast. Like Sean McDaniel said famously, I like to spread this one around. He says, if you're good, we will hear about you. He's right. You don't need to even have, you should do all those professional things, but if you're that good, we will hear about you. Jordan Rose, you just hear about him. All of a sudden, he's everywhere. Because, I'm responsible for a lot of that because he's my favorite drummer. No offense to my other favorite drummers, Clayton. No, but for real, we talked about this on Jordan's thing, but I'm just saying, he's one of those guys. You play great. You don't have to do anything. Just play.
Mm-hmm.
Jared Schoenig. I remember Jared Schoenig's another monster when he started subbing at Grease, and he's a big presence, and he's a great, amazing drummer. And he worked his way into every situation. He'll be working on Broadway as long as he wants to, because he's fantastic, and he works on everything. Started subbing.
If somebody needs to get in contact with you, how do they do so?
Call my agent. No, go to m2music.nyc. And you can email me on there too, but that's the website, but there's a area in the top right where you can log in, or you can register if you're new, and you just put in your basic information. I'll get it. And that's a good place to start for me to get into the database, which really helps me kind of centralize all that stuff. I can really, just now, I need to find a reed player for this off-Broadway thing, and I'm out of ideas. Everybody that I can think of is working or on tour, so I look in there for some new players that have submitted information. It's been very, very helpful for me. I've hired people based on their submissions into my system. Absolutely have. Yep.
When somebody was sick over the pandemic, or they couldn't make it, or something else happened, and you're dealing with a tour.
Oh yeah.
How do you have a network of musicians in each city across the United States, or do you just rely on the locals in that particular area?
So there are Michael Aaronses and Michael Kellers in every city. There are local contractors in every city. And some of the big cities have more than one. And, so when there's a Broadway tour going around, this is the kind of the way it works. I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but there are some tours that travel self-contained, so they don't pick up any locals. And then there are other tours that, if say it's a 10-piece band, they're only going to travel 3, and they're going to pick up 7 in every city. So when those situations happen, the music coordinator has to coordinate with other music coordinators around the country to I look at the route schedule. I see where they're going, and I have to advance each of those cities. I have to get in touch with them and say, my tour is coming to you in a month, and here's what we need. We need these 7 players, hire them, and here's the music, here's where the rehearsal is going to be, here's how many hours we need. We'll rehearse in the lobby, send us the specs, and so I have to. It's a lot of work. See, this is the stuff people don't see. I have to manage tours all day, so they're picking up local musicians. So I might be talking to a local contractor in Kansas City about all of that. So during COVID, what happened? Well, I had tours that even if they were self-contained. Oh, and before I get to that, there's some cities where they're called Rule 24 cities. You know about this? In the Pamphlet B contract, which is the touring contract, the AFM touring contract, Rule 24 says that if you're in a place less than 6 weeks and you hit these cities, and it lists them, certain big cities, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, part of Philly, DC, St. Louis, Detroit, Toronto, and I'm probably missing 1 or 2. There's certain cities spelled out. When you hit those cities, you have to hire a certain number of locals. Well, I should say you can only come in with a certain number of travelers, is what I should say. So if you're in one of those named cities less than 6 weeks, you can only come in with 5 players. And if you're in those cities for more than 6 weeks, you can only come in with 3 players. So let's say you're a 10-piece band like Hamilton, travels around the country self-contained. When we hit LA for 4 weeks, we can only come in there with 5. For the sake of argument, that's exactly how that works. So you lay off those 5 players for 4 weeks and pick up the locals because you're forced to. And then if you're out of LA, you're in Portland, then they come back in Portland.
I guess it makes sense from a local point of view. You want to hire as many local musicians.
Well, it's a big fight because producers don't like Rule 24. It's complicated. It's expensive. It's all of those things. The local rates are much more than the touring rates. You have to rehearse them. It's like there's reimbursement. You have to reimburse the presenter. It's all this complicated business stuff. It'd be much better off.
But then they know that going in on a tour, it's like you chose to do this. These are the rules, so you have to pay, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying, if they could get rid of Rule 24, they would.
Why is it Rule 24?
That's just there's
more than rules.
50
Okay.
rules in the contract. That's rule number 24. So during COVID, even if the show's traveling self-contained and we're in Des Moines, 7:15 positive COVID test. Oh, we don't have our cellist tonight. Well, I'm calling the local contractor in Des Moines, who I would otherwise have no business dealing with because that's not a Rule 24 city. The only time I'd call them is if I'm actually going to pick up locals there. But I haven't.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Okay.
So I might say, hey man, like, can you get me a violinist or a cellist tonight in 30 minutes? You know, that happened 2-3 times a week during COVID.
What?
Oh
So
yeah.
is it the job of the contractor to do that for you, and do they get a benefit from it?
Yep.
What do you mean? They get a benefit from it, and it's their job.
Well, if they're hiring a musician, a lot of times they're going to be paid local rates, Des Moines local rates, whatever that is. So if that payroll is run through that theater, whatever Des Moines theater, whatever, I don't remember what theater it's there. If they're running the theater payroll, just like Schubert runs Broadway payroll, that contractor is associated with that theater. They're going to be running the payroll. You're going to be paying a contractor too.
Okay.
Or sometimes I've also run into markets where the local is really weak, like some of these right to work states, actually, like Florida, where their union is barely hanging by a thread. They don't have to hire a union. The touring rates are more than the local rates. So the contractor will say, well, you know what? You just be better off pay them the touring rates. It's higher, and I'll just invoice for my time. Like I'll just, it's a little bit. So the player's going to get paid on either way, they're going to be on a contract, but they're better off getting the touring rates because it's higher. See, all this is all shit you got to know. Oh, the contractor hires the band, and then you never see him again. What a nice, cushy job that must be. They have no idea. No idea. But we didn't even get into the playing. We didn't talk about drumming too much. This is a drumming podcast.
No, this is more interesting to me.
Oh, I've always been tight with drummers, and I think it's back to those early days of playing with my friend David, and being just guitar and drums every day after school, and switching up, and just I've always loved playing rhythm guitar and locking in with drums. And really listening to the hi-hat patterns, the bass drum and the bass, where the bass and the bass drum are putting it where I can play inside of that, So like I have an appreciation for drummers that I think is pretty deep. I always hang out with them. Like I have so many drummer friends, probably more than anybody.
Your top 5 drummers of all time,
not including Ringo.
Yes.
Okay, because to me the Beatles are above, like they're in their own category. They don't, like, people say, what's your favorite band? It's not the Beatles because they're not a band. They're like beyond. You have to take them off the table. So not without Ringo. Okay, so John Bonham, Steve Gadd, Dave Lombardo, Elvin Jones, Steve Jordan, Buddy Williams. There is nobody that plays it down where he does. It's just, there's just a thing when you hear a player like that where they put it, and the sound of the drum and the feel, it's like, I can't describe it. The pocket is unbelievable. It's music. It's not just drums. And I played, I remember one time on a sound check, we were just doing Band of Gypsies, Hendrix stuff. He's all over that. I mean, he's a great rock drummer too. But the pocket, it's just, and not just funky, just sound. It's just, to me personally, he's my favorite really deep connection musically that I've never felt before and since with Buddy.
That's amazing.
No, I'm not kidding. I don't know if I've told him that. I haven't played with him in probably 20 years, but I've never forgotten that.
He's going to hear it now.
Better.
Top 5 guitarists of all time. They got George Harrison out of the mix.
George Harrison. Okay, George Benson, Wes Montgomery, Grant Green, Jimi Hendrix. That's 4, and then the 5th.
No Eddie.
Really tough.
No Dave Mustaine. Or what?
I want to say like a you know what? Albert King.
Really? No Shredder? No, none of the metal people from... Really?
No.
Why?
when I played metal, I was never a soloist. I could do it, but that wasn't my thing. My right hand, James Hetfield was like my idol, because I always felt that his right hand was the drummer of Metallica.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So the speed and the power of and the rhythm of the right hand, and the chugging and the galloping and all of that, the rhythmic stuff that was going on with Metallica, like I was always way more into that than like the dive bomb, like harmonic, Steve Vai stuff, or even the Slayer side of it, like the really crazy, like shredding. And I could do it, but that wasn't what I liked riffs better than that.
Are you a Tom Morello fan?
I do like Tom Morello. I like the band Rage Against the Machine, and I like Tom Morello. He's an interesting player. He's definitely very, very unique.
Who are your favorite riff inventors of all time?
Oh man, well, Tony Iommi, James Hetfield, Angus Young. I really like Steve Cropper. Yeah, there's some interesting people on those lists. I'm in this interesting place now where I'm like, I wasn't on a show, and contracting started coming back, and I was, for the first time in 20 years, not on a show. And I was thinking to myself, wow, well, this is the first thing Keller said to me when we started working together. He's like, are you sure you want to do this? You're going to have to stop playing. And I said, what? I'm never going to stop playing. Why would I do that? He said, oh, you'll see. And I'm like, I'm not going to stop playing. And 8 years in, I got to that crossroads where it was like, well, now I'm not on a show, and then COVID happened. And then I'm like, well, now I really don't have time to do both. I was crazy for doing both. Wow. Now I know what he meant. But then I started thinking, well, I don't have to stop playing. I might stop playing Broadway for now. But that's when I was like, well, I got nervous. Like, well, I'm not playing every day. My chops suck. I'm not, like I'm so busy working all day on the computer and phone calls and meetings and all this shit. I guess that's it. My days as a musician are over. But then I learned to accept that and started shedding again for me, not for a gig, for me. And it took about 2 weeks. I kind of got it back. I was like, oh man, I'm kind of playing like I used to, back in the day, but at a more mature level, like my ears were, it was like when you're working in school, there's that hunger, like I got to work, I got to pay my bills, I got to shed, because I got to get the gig. When I was at my height of contracting and playing on a show, I wasn't really inside the music. I was muscle memory. Then the cue would end and I'd be on the computer, and then I'd be da-da-da-da-da. And that's not being a musician. And it was complacency. And when COVID stopped all that, and I finally started rediscovering my love of the guitar and music again, it took a minute, but like I got it back. Then I put out the record. So,
which is, by the way, I'm going to just interrupt you. Michael Ahrens has a new album out, Ahrens, Finland, and Rose. Michael Ahrens, Eric Finland, and Jordan Rose. And it's amazing. You all need to buy a copy of it. And I didn't see that trio. I've seen two other versions, which featured Sam Merrick on drums at a place in Harlem a few weeks ago. I also saw them with Carter McLean in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to the day when you have the original trio and you're playing Madison Square Garden.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Or wherever you decide to play. Vanguard for a week. It's something definitely to check out. And I'm glad you actually put that out. I'm glad you're playing out again. And I'm sure it brings you joy to actually play your music and get out in front of people and do what you've always,
I've never done it. I've always been a side musician, side man. So like, that's the music that when I'm playing, that I like to, the Grant Green, George Benson, organ trio, organ, soul, funk, jazz configuration. That's what I've always gravitated to. My favorite records were like that. So I met Jordan Rose, I think I said this on his podcast episode, but The way I hooked up with Eric Finland was through him. They were roommates. They knew each other. So Jordan and I were talking about collaborating in some way, because during COVID, we did like an online collaboration. You know, I did some tracks on one of his things, and we got to talking. And then he said, well, my old roommate is this ridiculous organ player, Eric Finland. And I didn't know him. So he said, three of us should get together. So Jordan kind of put the group together. We were just getting together, and it was like, well, what's next? Do we get a gig? Do we do this? Do we do that? And I just said, you know what? I have to do a record, because I've never done it. I keep threatening to do it. I've been trying to do this for my whole life. And it's not, once I do it, I'm going to do more. You know, it's just like, I want to start the ball rolling. And I just like came up with all these tunes, and we just went in. It was very quick. Went to the studio, and we just recorded it all live in the live room. No separation, no headphones, no nothing. Just boom, mics everywhere. And it just has that authentic sound of that group, of that kind of group. And but yeah, man, that's the kind of stuff just came right out, you know. And yeah, so I'm revisiting that side of creativity and being able to finally separate, like, because I've been saying lately, I've been using this quote, like, I have enough Broadway in my life right now, you know, like, it's what I do now. I mean, I'm a Broadway music coordinator. I have this established career now. I'm very thankful and blessed to be able to do that. And, you know, I've been in this community long enough that I know so many players, and the phone rings, and that's great. But like 5:30 rolls around, I don't want to play more Broadway. As a guitarist, I don't want to now do that. And I've never been able to do that. I know most people can't. It's taken 20 something years, but I tried it right after COVID nervously, and it worked out. So I'm just riding that as long as I can. I'm not saying I'll never play Broadway again, but it's not my focus. Let's just say that. Being a self-aware musician is important. In other words, understanding your own limitations is important. So in other words, knowing what gigs not to take. Don't put yourself in positions where you're going to cheapen either what you're trying to get or do, or your brand. And what I mean by that is, back in the you have to, I mean, that it's hard, because when you're starting out, my teacher, Mr. Newman in Duke Ellington, said, never say no to a gig. You just never say no to a gig. That's how you get started. So when I started out, I never turned down any gig ever. And I was like, fine, there's some legit classical guitar. I'll figure it out. I'll learn it. And I did. And I shed and I learned it. And, you know, there's mandolin, and, I'll figure it out. And I busted my ass to figure it out. But it's exhausting. And once you navigate the space, you start to see that, wow, shit, I really shouldn't be taking those classical gigs anymore, you know? Once you're in the scene, then you know your limitations. So I would say, like for example, obviously I'm in a different place now than I was starting out, but I wouldn't take a gig with heavy mandolin on it. Do I have a mandolin? Yes. Can I read on it and play? Yes. I'm not good. I'm not, you know, I don't shed. I don't practice. It's not what I do. I do what I do. You know, I know what I do. So unless you love playing mandolin all the time, you know, Anne Klein is a great mandolin player. I don't know how many people know that, but she's a great mandolin player. So when a chair comes up with mandolin, she should do it. She's a great guitar player, but also a great mandolin player. Sometimes it can be about the money. Some musicians are a little too money focused. Like, you have to weigh, what does it pay versus what is the opportunity that lies after that. So if you're doing a gala and and it pays shit, but there's a composer that's playing piano who has 3 readings that you heard about, you probably want to do that, because you might play great and he might want you to do one of those readings. That reading could turn into the next to normal, you know? So you want to be in the position where you're seen and heard by new people. So you have to know what the gig is. If you're doing gigs just for the money, you're taking a chance on missing an opportunity. You know, you might miss an opportunity for the next level of your career. But at the same time, you know, if there's some gig that's like, it's a Saturday night gig, it pays $150 at a senior citizens home with, you know, a quartet, and you got to bring your own drums and drive there. It's in the middle of traffic and meet with musicians you don't know. And the guy who called you was referred to you like 3 or 4 levels down from, you know, I mean, you can do it if you really want to play, but is it going to get you anywhere? Probably not. I mean, only you can be the judge. A gig is a gig. Right now, I'm in a place, I just want to play. I want to play where I'm challenged. So I do want to know who the musicians are. At the same time, I just want to play guitar. So I'll probably say yes to gigs where I can do my thing. I'm probably not going to, you know, take that gig on Long Island, you know. But yeah, it's also knowing your limitations. If the gig is like a heavy banjo gig in Connecticut, like, yeah, I want to play, but I'm not going to do that, you know. Refer a great banjo player, you know, that you know. I would say for the young musicians is like, don't turn down any gig unless there's a really good reason to, and don't do it for the money.
Don't turn it down for the money, you mean? Yeah,
don't turn it down if it pays shit. Can I curse on this? I know it's a little late to be asking.
Thank you once again, Mike Ahrens, Finland, and Rose. Check out that album, M2 Music.
www.m2music.nyc. Oh, and the M Squared Music Instagram too. M2 Music NYC.
Thank you once again.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure talking to you, and we could have a Joe Rogan length podcast because there's so much to talk about, and there's so much more to talk about. But
I don't think I've even gotten into most of this stuff I got into on this one. This was a good one. We dug deep.
Yes, we did. I'm glad we did because there's so much that I didn't know, and I'm learning so much about what you do. It's fascinating, man.
Thank you.
Whoever sees this, make sure you check out the album. Check out his website.
Thanks for the plug.
Reach out to him and look out for the next gig.
Yeah, I do. Please reach out because I always want to know who the new players are. I need to know who the new players are because I am always looking.
To continue producing the high-quality podcast you're listening to, publishing engaging newsletter content, and posting YouTube videos, we would appreciate any financial contributions you can make. At this time, we have no advertisers, and we'd like to keep it that way. Our staff is small but growing. We can only produce a show with listener contributions from people like you.
5, 4.
There are a couple of ways you can do that. You can sign up to be a monthly or annual subscriber at BroadwayDrumming101.com. You can also contribute any amount you wish through PayPal at paypal.me/BroadwayDrumming101 or through Venmo at BroadwayDrumming101. We appreciate any support you can give.